quick disclaimer. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that our discussion will touch upon topics of power, privilege, and oppression. As facilitators and hosts of this podcast, Alex and I recognize that our backgrounds, upbringing, and going to Santa Clara University imbue us with certain privileges while also acknowledging aspects of our identities that have been marginalized or oppressed. We are committed to an ongoing and learning and exploration of these dynamics. We want to emphasize that we are not experts of the subject matter and rather individuals who are in a process of learning as well. After getting that out of the way, now let's begin the new episode.
Hello everybody, welcome to Word on the Street. I'm Shelly, an SIE at the OML, and today I have a guest with me.
Hi, I'm Alejandro Gonzalez. I was on another Word on the Street episode, not exactly sure which one, but thank you for having me back. Quick little things about myself. I am the Youth Empowerment Program Coordinator for the Multicultural Center at Santa Clara University. Yeah, that's a mouthful, but that is my title, and I'm excited to be here again on Word on the Street.
I know, I'm really excited to kind of get into this conversation. So I really want to talk about privilege. I think right now in society, privilege is seen as very negative. It has a very negative connotation to it. And kind of before we set the grounds of this conversation, let's start with a definition. Merriam-Webster.
Shout out Merriam.
Exactly. Okay, privilege can be defined as a right or immunity granted as a particular benefit, advantage, or favor. So we can kind of see that privilege is not what it's used. I feel like privilege is used very differently in the context of when we kind of like speak about it, but not what the definition incurs. Like, I feel like it's one of the words that has made a shift, like has a different meaning to it now.
Yeah, definitely when you speak about privilege in a context, it's used to like shame people when you say things like check your privilege, and it's just generally meant to like kind of bring people down at this point.
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting to kind of tie in this article. This article I read is called Check Your Privilege, Used to Annoy Me, Now I Get It by Gaby Hinsliff. She kind of has like a little blurb, I'm going to quote her, and she says, "And yet to confess to having been dealt with even one good card in life invites in charge of not having succeed on merit, which is why so many people refuse to accept it." It's kind of talking about people love to think they defeated all odds and that they are this special snowflake and that they succeeded on their own grounds. And I think this is kind of ties in the cultural, the American individualism, and that in general, we take so much offense because you're discrediting the fact how much work I put in when you remark that check your privileges, and in a way being like a killjoy. And I think breaking that kind of aspect of illusion that you didn't do it on your own, and a lot of people are like feel like attacked, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think this is just, I think for everyone can understand this feeling. You put so much work into something and then someone comes along and says that wasn't completely you. Everyone's going to kind of be hurt by that. And I think telling someone to check their privilege wasn't meant to be like that, and so, but people still take it that way.
Yeah, I think in a way check your privilege was supposed to be like check what has brought you to the place you have been, and not in a way that is supposed to be discrediting. Like, let's kind of put it into frame here. For example, there is this, let's say this kid who goes through school has, lived in a good neighborhood, got fed, good food every day, had his parents help him with homework, and when things were too hard, he got a tutor. He was able to, persevere. He was academically well because on his own merit, he continued to be academically well. He was able to get into college, he moved on to a university, he had a successful job, and yes, he did that on his own success and his own, hard work and efforts that he put in. But however, the things that we saw right here are these like stepping stones that help him, kind of get to a point where he could thrive in that space, like it wasn't taking away that the fact that he worked hard, but it's that he had these things that like was able to make the process of easier, even go to a university. Like, let's, having your parents, work with you on homework might seem like a very subtle thing, but not always given to kids, to be able to have that help or to have those, like, aspects of, like, development, you know what I mean? Those are kind of important, to be able to even excel in school, to get a tutor, to be able to be successful in those spaces.
Yeah, because a lot of kids, first of all, let me say I've worked with kids since I was 15. I'm now 20 years old now, but a lot of kids, their parents work 2 jobs, or like, let's say both parents work 2 jobs. One is the parent actually home, or if the parent is home and with the child, does the parent have the energy to even help the child with homework, things like that? So a lot of times it's just the child is in this situation not because they have to be, it's just, well, I'm sorry, not because they want to be, it's because they have to be. Like, that's just their reality. Their parents work, their parents can't help them because their parents are too busy trying to support the family as a whole. So it can become tough to focus on a child's individual needs.
Mm-hmm. I think there's like so many different levels of privilege for sure. Like, I think we can talk about there's a level of like educational, family structure. How are you supported? How are you being fed? Like, how are you, be able to exist in your life in an easier, more manner? Like, what are the things that are your issue? Like if you grew up, the fact that you can do extracurriculars because you had to go work to contribute to the family, or you can, have these other opportunities because you had to do other things into support, and I don't think a lot of people realize, and I think in general, when we talk about the aspect of reflecting on your privilege, to be kind of grateful and understand, because I feel like, I don't know about you, but like you kind of know when someone has a certain amount of privilege because they can become very ignorant in certain standpoints. Maybe they think solutions are so much easier. Like, oh my gosh, well, don't you just like go get just a tutor? Oh, wait, like I can't afford a tutor.
Yeah.
Oh, or like just like, ask your parents' friends like about this, internship opportunity. And they're like, well, my parents like work at retail. You know what I mean? Like there's connections and there's things that you kind of, a base that can help you excel on.
I completely agree, and I think what you're kind of getting at is it rears its head mostly like within wealth. Like you see the one rich kid who doesn't understand the value of money, and that's because they've never had to worry about money. And it's just things like that where you can tell when someone is privileged because they've never had that worry.
I think when people like say like check your privilege, just like check the advantages that you have that I wish I had.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I honestly think that, in retrospect, like, when people are like, check your privilege, they're more of like, oh, like, you realize that you've had stepping stones that have caused you to be successful, that the reason I'm behind or falling behind is because I didn't have those resources. It doesn't mean I'm stupid or not smart. It doesn't mean I'm any less than you. It's just because I didn't have that foundational standpoint. And you know what I've noticed mostly in education? That's been the highly fact between who's been privileged, like who had more privilege in that situation, or who hasn't to, excel. In high school, we had a, IB gifted program, and a lot of the students who were in the IB program grew up literally, like, from the start, tutoring, extra classes, extra education, extra foundation. So when they got into a certain point into high school, they were super prepared to excel educationally into a higher level like college. But, kids who didn't necessarily have those resources kind of fell short, but they were assumed to be stupid because they're like, why don't you already know this? It was because I didn't have the extra tutoring or extra resources. You know what I mean? Like, They just assumed that it's because you didn't work hard enough versus because they had the resources. And there was like this kind of like tension between the people who had all those resources because they couldn't recognize it. They didn't recognize it as a privilege. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. The story that comes to mind when you're talking about this, it's a story that my mom always told me. She's been a teacher for 25 years, but when she used to work, she was in Southside LA, working at a school for definitely like kids that were in the hood, underprivileged, did not have as many resources. And one of the things that happened to them constantly was at least once or twice a week, the school was put on shutdown because there would be crime in the area happening nearby the school. And so I think my mom said there was an alleyway behind the school or something where a lot of things would happen. And so there would always be crime in the area. The school would be shut down. So it's like, how can you compare the kids learning in an environment where half the time they're just spent huddled down, afraid for their lives, afraid that someone's going to come in and hurt them, versus the kid that is at another school in a wealthier area, less crime, and they don't have to worry about that. They just can sit and learn and enjoy the school day with their friends.
Yeah.
Like, you can't compare those two situations.
Yeah, I think it really gets to the point that there's just so many different aspects of privilege that people don't realize. You know, safety and security of the location where they're learning or being educated. You know, the tutoring or extra classes they have, the programs that was offered. There are some programs that they don't have AP, and I feel like a lot of people use those AP credits to be able to like get a little bit ahead in college, or get a foundationally hard enough curriculum. So when they get into college, they just don't feel completely overwhelmed because the foundation of their learning, you know, was they learned it at a younger or like high school before they go into college. Because that's why I feel like I see a lot of like people, maybe their education system wasn't very good, so when they got into college they feel completely overwhelmed by the amount of work, feel like they can't do it, feel like, because that preparation process is also something to be considered as a privilege as well, to be able to build up of that education, to know enough to be able to like, I'll even apply or even pay for college application admissions. Like applications for college were kind of expensive, especially if you're applying to like 5 or 10. Like I feel like there's a lot of kids who are like to like over like 15 colleges.
And some colleges charge $75 just to send in an application. Yeah. If you're doing $75 for 10, that's $750 just to get your name in. What?
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah, it's really astonishing.
Did you I'm curious. Did your counselor ever give you waivers to help pay the fee for college like applications? Because I know I was able to do that. So I paid only like 2 or 3 of like the 10 colleges I applied to.
The only reason I wasn't given those resources, it was actually because my school is super wealthy. So they just kind of expected people to be able to pay for it.
Oh, wow.
So, well, yes, like if you were like on the lowest end, then yes, they would probably offer them or like give you the options. But they didn't really advertise those resources or those options, at least to me, because I was at a pretty like wealthy area, so they just kind of assumed that everybody could just pay for it themselves. I know that sounds weird, but no. I have another story that completely validates your experience, because I worked at a park that was it's the one that makes the most money in the LA city area. That's where I worked, and we drew in the most money through camp. And throughout the city, they offer like benefits to help people like pay for camps and stuff, but they didn't offer it at my park because we were in one of the wealthiest areas of Los Angeles. Oh.
So sometimes I would get people coming in and asking me like, hey, do you guys have any like subsidizing to help me pay for care for my child? And I had to say no, because I knew we had it, but not at my park, so I'd send them to other parks, and I'd hope they got the help they needed, but I don't know. And that's just a whole nother conversation of privilege, of just parents being able to drop their kids off at camp.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that like the experience of an individual can have who doesn't have a lot of privilege but is in a place that has a lot of privilege, there is like this kind of conflict, because people will be like, oh, if you don't have a lot of privilege and you're going to a place that is wealthy and has a lot of privilege, then you would automatically assume that they would get those resources. But no, because literally nobody uses them, or literally nobody advertises them, or, you know, just because they just assume that you have enough. And there is this like kind of internal conflict, because I feel like that happened to me a lot in just my educational background. Like, yes, I was a part of the IB program, and I was very, very grateful that I could be a part of such a program, but I was so not ready for it in a way, because like the students around me, I feel like were practicing exams at such a young age, or practicing tests. They got it like down. For me, like this was the start of rigor. This was the start of me learning about it. And there was this kind of like, I felt always 5 steps behind every single person that I was like part of the class with, because they already learned this, and I was like, I haven't. This is fresh information for me. You know, it's like, yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, because when I was in middle school and high school, I actually used to help a lot of my friends out with their classes, just because I was always in the higher math classes as a child. I was just thankfully given the opportunity to take higher level math courses, so oftentimes friends would come to me for help because they knew I was good at it or had already taken the class they were doing. And so it's just one of those things where you don't, like, I never realized that even just having a higher math class was a privilege for me, because that set me on a track where they were giving me harder courses than other kids. And so they were trying to encourage me for honors, but they're not doing that for other kids that they don't expect, because that kid may not have started off in the higher level math track. But what if that kid's on my level now? What if that kid was on my level, but they're just discrediting them and not giving them that opportunity because they just didn't start where I'm at? Hearing
about kind of your experience as a younger student, do you I know you work with kids a lot, and I'm just kind of wondering, can you kind of tell when a student or a younger child, do you think they understand privilege, or what conceptualization they might have of it? And do you think that, can you tell if a kid had more privileges than the other?
Yeah, I would say I can tell which kids have more privilege than the others, especially just when talking with the kids. Kids don't really have filters. So if they have worries and issues and you are a trusted adult to them, they will voice those issues. And just hearing the difference in issues between children, that's when you can tell the privilege. As for if children themselves can tell who has privilege or not, I wouldn't say they define it as privilege, but they know who has advantages and disadvantages. And that's why you see hierarchies in school and bullying and stuff, because there's the kids that have less and the kids that have more.
Oh, yeah, they can recognize, especially I feel a big one is clothes.
Yeah.
If you can kind of tell if someone has maybe listed disadvantages at home and not be able to have the accessibility of buying new clothes and buying what's trendy, especially what's trendy. I feel that's really big about schools, because that's the social hierarchy that's kind of happened, the popularity. Oh, she got the most trendiest item, or the newest phone, or I don't know, that I think kids look at that and see a lot of value in that for some reason. They kind of capitalize on privilege or those items. Does that make...
Yeah, no, it 100% does, but one of the things I'm a big proponent of is kids learn from their parents. So I think it's more so that would be more of a cultural thing. They're learning privilege from their parents, and they're mimicking their parents' actions, because kids are genuinely, they are sponges. What you tell them and how you act, they will observe and absorb. So if you notice a kid acting with privilege, it's usually because they have privilege and they learned that from the parents.
That is such a good point, because I feel when I've seen those TikTok little things, and they're talking about the stories of how they grew up, or how their immigrant parents, or parents that have moved, how much effort or how much they put in to, they always have to remind their child, when I was a kid, I had to go do this, and
I've heard that
you know what I mean? But that's their way of helping their child recognize how much they have, how much that privilege is. Because if they're some kids' parents always had privilege as well, was always in that cycle, of course they're not going to be able to teach their child the aspect of different levels of privilege. And then, an immigrant parents, that's just an example, how they felt and how they learned because they're parents. And, they grow up to understand why they're like that, because, sometimes the kids are oh, not again, we don't want to hear about your hard journey on a boat, you know what I mean? And then they grow to appreciate it. They kind of recognize it. I feel there's a growth of understanding privilege. There's an age, there's this...
Yeah, my parents went through 10 times more BS than I ever did in my life, if I'm being honest. From the stories they tell me, I am privileged to have dealt with 10 times less than them, because they set up a base for me where I didn't have to deal with the issues they had as a child. And I'm thankful for that every day. I gotta hear, when I was a kid.
Yeah, when I was a child, I raked my, it was just some random, I had a hike for my school for an hour, you know what I mean? Sometimes I know we're laughing, but that was real for them, and that was their way of teaching their kids that, and it's so fascinating, honestly.
Yeah, and a kid's not gonna learn how to appreciate their struggles if their parents never appreciate the struggles that they went through. Well, not appreciate, but just recognize the struggles they went through.
So how do you think we're gonna move forward with this? Okay, can we even redefine privilege to people? Can we even re-explain? Because I feel it's so down the deeps that it has such a negative affiliation. I don't know how we're gonna be able to come back from that.
So That's honestly a tough question, but I think one of the ways we start is reframing the context of privilege into an advantage and teaching people to appreciate their privilege. And that honestly starts with not shaming people for having privilege. You have to approach the conversation where you're a teacher. For example, you can give them the example of their stepping stone. Say they started at a great school, and like me, they started in higher level math classes. And that led to them just getting into honors classes in high school. So it's the butterfly effect. If I take away the higher level math classes, I won't be in honors classes. Maybe I don't have as good of a GPA. Maybe I'm a little more focused on sports. Maybe I find a different opportunity in sports, or maybe I don't get an opportunity in sports or education, and I end up doing nothing of what I want. It's the butterfly effect. You got to show people this one thing leads to a million different things and your life currently.
All right, yeah, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. I think people don't realize that one privilege sparks into so many more opportunities, that it's a branching. Because when you have one good start, like, it results in just more likelihood to succeed. And kind of moving into a different direction, I think I really want to talk about visible and invisible privilege, and I think this would be a really good context in seeing it in, like, gender aspects of like, you know, male privilege, or just the privilege to be, like, binary in whatever expectation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like kind of fitting the societal norm. And we can talk a bit about culture here, because American culture is definitely patriarchal. If we look at all of our presidents, we literally just had the first female vice president. Not even a woman president. Yeah. What is this democracy?
What have we faced? I just don't understand, especially, like, come on, like, you don't think a woman could be speaking bars out there?
Yeah, even me just being born a man, like, I never really considered that a privilege until now, actually. Now I'm actually starting to think about, if I wasn't a man, what would have my life been like? I would have been treated so much differently growing up. I genuinely wouldn't be the person I am right now. Everything would be different. Everything
you would see is different. I think one of the things I would be talking about is, for class, I wrote, like, this opinion piece, and it was kind of talking about how, like, I grew of consciousness of my gender. And one of the things is that I was like very young, and I was like, I really want to be a football player. I think we talked about this before. I really wanted to be a football player. And, like,
I can still imagine you as a linebacker in the NFL.
100%. What do you think? You can't doubt me like that. Pulling up. Player. Absolutely. NFL, contact me. OML Podcast. Okay. But to kind of go into the direction which I was trying to speak originally.
Very sorry.
Was that if a boy, quote, whatever, went into it as like, I want to be a football player, they'd be like, all right, let's set you up. The moment I said it, they said, hey, no, girl, what do you think? Why you think that? I said, because, you know, I was like, my brother wants to be a football player. Why can't I? You know, that thought didn't cross my mind, apparently. But, you know, that's an experience. The restriction, like, things that I wanted to do and the things that I thought were interesting was something I didn't have access to or didn't assume to have access to just because of some fucking gender norm.
Yeah. I read your opinion piece. You showed it to me. I really loved it. And one thing I always remember is you wrote, I was told I had infinite possibilities. You were told as a child that you could be anything you want. You have infinite possibilities. And then suddenly someone just comes along and goes, actually, they're not infinite.
Yeah.
You can't be everything that you want to be.
Absolutely. Wait, that's literally America, though. They're like individualism. If you work hard enough, you will succeed. But, like, not actually.
Because we're going to put up 30 million barriers if you don't fit the social norms.
Period. Like, that's just how life is. And it's so frustrating. And I don't know. It's just, we just don't think of, like, I feel like humans itself is so, like, selfish in a way. Like, I guess we don't recognize the consciousness of, like, other people's experience unless we, like, intentionally do it. or see it in front of us.
Yeah.
Like, we just think the world that we live in is pretty much what everybody else experiences.
Honestly, biggest realization for 10-year-old me was like, oh wait, people think differently from how I think.
Yeah, you said philosophical conversation.
10 years old.
You're like, wait, what? People think differently? But
and sometimes people don't realize that till much later than 10 years old.
No, that's fair. I think that inspires to say that, like, we need to be very intentional about recognizing our advantages and our privileges, and we really need to, like, actually look at it and realize what was the stepping stones that made us successful, what got us here. And I kind of think about that often because, you know, I'm first generation. My parents didn't go to high school. My dad didn't finish. Oh, my parents, they finished high school but didn't go to college. My dad didn't finish, like, he got his GED, but he didn't finish, high school at the moment. But it was just because, like, family issues, or, like, it was because, my mom, like, had the decision to make to quit going to school or get a full-time job. And she just had, like, my brother and stuff, and she had to make this decision. She couldn't have both.
Yeah. So
she cut off the education. But you know what I mean? Like, these are, like, invisible building blocks. Invisible things that people don't realize that get you where you thought you got yourself.
Yeah.
But you didn't. And it's fine. Like, I think an aspect is, like, we need to shift that perception of, like, privilege being not a bad thing, but a tool to be helpful for others, which will lead us into this article that I actually looked at. All these articles will be preferenced in the bio.
Link down below.
So the article is called The Case for Privilege. I don't know why that did not come out of my mouth. The Case for Privilege. Okay, The Case for Privilege. And it kind of incorporated this quote I really want to share. It says, "Privilege is not in and of itself bad. What matters is what we do with the privilege. I want to live in a world where women have access to education, and all women can earn PhDs if they so desire. Privilege does not have to be negative, but we have to share resources and take direction about how to use our privilege in ways that empower those who lack it." And this is by Bell Hooks. And that really got me thinking, is that privilege is just a tool to be useful for others. If we have these privileges, as currently now we are college students, we have the privilege to helping, younger generations. How do you apply for college? How do you do these steps? And, even before I left, high school, I remember, like, the underclassmen, or people I knew, I was like, hey, like, if you guys need help with this, like, college applications, if you guys need, that's a resource. Like, we ourselves can be resources if we want to, but we have to be willing to be vocal about it, to be, intentional about it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I love how you said being a resource, because one thing I strive to be is a resource for kids. I want to be an open space for, like, kids to come to me and be able to talk their issues, because not every kid has that open and safe space. And when I worked camp, sometimes camp would be that kid's open and safe space. There was times over summer where I am seeing this child more than I'm seeing their parent, than they're seeing their parent, right? So it's like, now I have privilege, and I don't know what's going on with this kid, but I have to still show them some way, somehow out, because they were entrusted to me. They were put in my camp.
Yeah, I think it really just shows that we literally have all the vicinities and tools at our hands to be a resource. Especially, at least, like, personally, I feel like I can be a resource of, like, right now we are both resources at, working at the school and trying to promote social justice work, to educate the community, to educate the young community, to be a person where we can share the knowledge that we have, so not everybody has to stay within this ignorant space. Like, we have a lot of potential. Like, every single person in this university also has a potential to be a resource for anybody, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I just think everyone has their own valid experiences to share, and one of the things is that I love to say is you can learn something from everyone. I try to talk to a lot of people because you never know what experiences people have had and what knowledge you can gain from them, and, that could be a privilege, like, where you now have that much more knowledge because that person was just able to share with you their experiences.
Yeah, you're gaining more knowledge to help others with. And also, I think, in general, like, let's say it's not even a knowledge about something, you can still be a resource in helping people and giving a space for people to talk about their issues and then, like, see and navigate with them. Because sometimes someone just needs a person to be like, let me help you research, or let me help you do these steps, or, like, I may know somebody who you could talk to. Like, those are, like, the very little things that could help spread the amount of privilege you have. Especially it's being, like, college students, I feel like we have a huge amount of privilege to be in a private institution, and that we can share this knowledge and be a resource to people in general.
Students, we've been educated, we've been taught so many things because we've been afforded the opportunity, like you said, to be at a private institution that really does focus on its teachers and its students, even though at times it may not feel like it. But yeah, we have privilege as college students, and we need to, like, I guess, yeah, just every person needs to be a resource and available to help because we're all going through such different things.
Yeah, I think I really want to talk about a section of the article, The Case for Privilege. To quote it, it says, for example, being born into a wealthy family is a privilege. Having parents who are college educated in another form of privilege. Being a white is a form of privilege. Each of these examples comes with its own set of advantages. Talk about privilege often implies that privileged people are responsible for the struggles of those who are not. It's not true. Privilege does not mean that somebody is responsible for the disadvantaged position of others. It doesn't mean that somebody with privilege has never faced hardships or they don't deserve success. And I think that's kind of where this gap is laying for, is that people who, you know, like when you're calling out like, oh, like you're privileged, they think that you're undermining and they don't deserve of success. Also, I feel like people project that people should feel a certain way about an experience. You know what I mean?
I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier on how people shame others for having privilege. And I don't know, like, where it comes from. Maybe it's, like, a source of jealousy because they're like, why did I have to, like, go through these hardships while this person didn't? But I think it's important, like you said, to recognize, like, hey, these people still worked. Although they may have had more opportunity and everything, they still worked for what they had. It's not, you can't discredit. You have to teach if they're over there flaunting their privilege.
Yeah, I kind of think it also goes back where we talked about individualism in culture. I think the reason that people associate discredit is out of the basis of the kind of culture of individualism and that kind of mindset. I feel like this narrative is really emphasized when you see through movies and novels that the privilege is like the exploiter, like the person who is like kind of this evil person who, like, I don't know, like every time it's set up, it's like kind of like the villain is the one who has like all the money, the resources, like, but they're just like making somebody's life shitty because they can. And I think in general, that kind of picture in mind has made people kind of think that's why privilege is a bad thing. You know what I mean? Just because they're like, oh, like...
Those with privilege usually use their privilege to put down others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, 100%. And, yeah, no, that makes sense why everyone thinks people with privilege are bad, because if their only experiences of people that are privileged and the stories they hear of people that are privileged are ones of
exploitation.
Exploitation. And I think it's also talked about a lot now because we've gone back into history and looked at how people with privilege have exploited people without.
It's
rooted in a lot of different things.
It's actually probably rooted historically. It's rooted in just in general capitalism. It's been rooted in greed, success, and the idea of like looking out for themselves. I think that's at a very American standpoint, is that you kind of look out for yourself, kind of the selfish encirclement of thought. And not to say that like Americans are inherently selfish. I think it's just we're kind of in a way trained to feel like we have to only take care of ourselves. Like this is our business. It's our kind of thing. Because, you know, like other cultures, I feel like talk about community.
And collectivism and like the betterment of all.
Like I see that a lot of it in like different cultures, you know what I mean? Like certain Asian cultures, they're really big about family connections, like holistically.
I will say that's the same for Latino culture as well. It's just the family is everything.
Mm-hmm. And I think that like kind of puts into frame, that gets rid of that selfishness aspect. But when you're kind of grown up to be kind of in this individualistic kind of mindset, it does maybe makes you conceptualize maybe more of an I than an us.
Yeah.
And that could also make that gap bigger of understanding privileges, because if we're always so focused on the us, then we never kind of get the opportunity to look at the people around us. Because
wait, do you mean we're so focused on like the individual aspect? Because you said we're so focused on the us.
Like ourselves.
Oh, yes, we're so focused on ourselves.
Yeah, we're just kind of focused on ourselves, and that it makes it difficult to think about other people, which in turn makes it difficult for us to help other people in a way, because we're not wanting to necessarily, we don't think it to be a resource or to expand ourselves to be better. Does that make sense? Or
we don't think of privilege as a resource to help us become better people?
No, it's that we're so individual, like we have such an individual mindset that it can make it very difficult for us to reflect other people's experiences.
Oh, yeah, 100%, just because everyone's own experiences give them their own unique perspective. It's a concept covered, I don't know, all throughout communications. I've been studying it for the past year, so.
Damn, you said basic. You just said the spoken facts of every text I read. I'm like, damn, okay. Shut me down.
I didn't mean to do that.
She said, check your privilege. Besides that, boy, not to.
I should.
Oh, not to be that way. That was a joke, by the way, all y'all fellow people.
Shelly and I are good friends.
No. Why would you even think that? We are moving on because
we have
Alex is unfunny. Unfunny.
I think I'm pretty funny, but let's move on. Sorry.
Come on. Check your privilege. I associate privilege with ignorance, I think.
Why? Why would you say that?
Well, it's because I feel like that's what people usually assume it to be, and maybe that's why I built it up. Because I feel like when you have all these privileges, you don't realize how much people actually struggle to get where they are.
I hesitate to call it ignorance because I just feel like that person has never experienced that situation, right?
A lack of knowledge.
Yeah, it's just... So
that's ignorance.
You fucking got me. But I feel like ignorance is more like you purposefully are not knowing. You know, you may know, but like you purposely avoid it. Like oh no, that's avoidance.
No, I can see maybe you just misinterpreted it as to be, but yeah, we're gonna do a little quick searchy.
Yep.
Lack of knowledge or information. Yeah, like I think.
So what is the intentional?
Okay, maybe it's not lack of knowledge because they're probably highly educated. Maybe it's just the lack of social awareness. The lack of understanding hardships that people can actually face.
Maybe a lack of empathy or sympathy?
Yes, that's a good one. I think because it's hard to be empathetic if you think it's just like, why didn't you do that? Like, why didn't you just, like, go get a tutor? Like, back to that example, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That lack of empathy, realizing, I can't afford one. And they're like, why can't you? Like, don't you have all that money?
No, because I've when I was younger, I was straight up asked a couple times, like, you can't afford that? And I was like, you can? Like,
what do you mean?
It's more normal for me to not afford than you being able to afford, like, whatever it was. You know, like, when people go, like, I'm going to my lake house and I'm going to go ride my jet skis, I'm like, huh?
That's so sick, though.
It's
but
so
like,
sick
see,
for them, but I'm just like...
But that's why we can't, like, we have to frame it as, like, we can't, like... That's a privilege, and that is awesome for them, and that's whatever success their family had or whatever, you know, stepping stones they did. But it's just, I guess it's recognizing not everybody doesn't automatically have those things. Because I think it just can be just seen as disrespectful, maybe. Like, is that why? It's like that people are like, oh, I'm just, like, going to buy jet ski. You don't have one? Like...
I think people do take that as disrespect, but it's genuinely just the person thinking that everybody has what they have.
And maybe that's what causes so much conflict, is because they just felt like they're not seen or not heard for their struggle.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's why they don't like when people don't know what other people have to go through, because they want to be recognized for their hard work. Because apparently we do like when we're recognized that we have faced every single challenge and have gone through every single thing. And it's funny because I feel like there's such a weird dichotomy between that, right?
Yeah,
because there's
like,
always...
how do we glorify a challenge so much, and then the people with the least challenges kind of, I don't know.
Right? And that's so interesting. I think it's just fascinating because, like, I think it's just all about wanting to be recognized. Like, just at the core value is that we all want to just be understood. And that privilege, in a way, makes us feel like that gap of understanding between one another is just like that it's far. Like, we're two different people. It's like the bridge is like, you can't even understand me at this point. Like, you don't understand my yacht, my caveats, you know. My luxury.
You just went, yachts. I was like, no, I cannot understand the luxury. I really can't.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just maybe privilege makes it feel like we just can't
connect.
Yeah. Maybe just we don't know, like, maybe we just feel like we're just misunderstood.
Yeah, to be honest, like, one of my best friends, loaded, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not trying to brag or anything. Honestly, sweetest family.
Ching!
They understand that they have privilege and they don't flaunt it. They don't do anything. And they're quite a humble family, honestly, but it's not often that I've seen that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like, I think people just kind of get upset for the fact that maybe someone has, like, excessive wealth and then they don't do anything about it. Or, like, they keep it to themselves, like that greed aspect. Like, I'm telling you, greed and privilege have been co-aligned with one another.
Yeah, 100%. What you just said, greed and privilege are aligned, and that's one of the things we talked about earlier, where we see it in all of our stories. The villain is usually the one with the most power, or the most wealth, or the most influence. They have all the privilege to influence, and the heroine or the hero is always coming up from the bottom, from nothing.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up from your bootstraps.
Yeah, and I also think the portrayal, like, in media, too, with, like, kids who come from privilege are just, like, snobby, like, little shits.
Yeah.
Is that, like...
No,
maybe that's just the... Like, that's why everybody's like, oh, you just don't know anything. You're just ignorant.
But in reality, we just gotta treat everyone as people. It doesn't matter if they have money, because they can still be cool.
Well, it's like, yes. I think what I'm trying to get at in general is just that we need to not put other people down because they have some privileges, but we also need to not, but we also need to make sure that we use ourselves as a resource as well. Like, I don't think it's going to be productive to shit on people in general. We can't shit on people because I think it makes people necessarily really defensive, and then you'll never have a productive conversation out of any of these conversations. You know what I mean? Like, if we just start assuming that people with these, you know, wealth in general can never come in to a conversation and be able to recognize and be able to assist or to understand how to use their privilege, like, I don't know if we ever get to the grounds of that.
I don't think... I lost myself.
Give me a second, I need to tell my story straight. My friends are in the bathroom.
Apologize for the interruption. Alex lost his train of thought. We are now back to our regular scheduled program.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's one of those things we were talking about earlier. Like, you have to teach, and one of the things that comes with being a teacher is patience. When I was working with kids, I learned a lot of patience, and it's because kids don't know anything of the world. You are the one teaching them the world. And so when someone comes and they have privilege and they're ignorant about it, they have that lack of knowledge, you have to be the teacher, and in that situation, they don't know that part of the world. So how can you be angry at someone when they just genuinely don't know? They're not trying to hurt anyone. They just genuinely don't know.
How do you know what you don't know? That's such a philosophical statement. I like it.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, so what have we come to learn today? We've learned that privilege... Eat the rich. That's what we've learned.
We learned not to eat the rich.
I'm joking. The moral of the story here is that we all have privileges. They can be invisible. They can be in so many different layers. The privilege is in so many different entities. It's not one statement. It's not just wealth. It's just, in general, certain parts of life. And I think we need to recognize that privilege is not a bad thing, and that we can use our own privilege to help and assist others through their life too, and to make them succeed and excel as well. I don't know why. Like, we need to stop demonizing privilege. Like, privilege is good.
Privilege is just a concept.
We're all here.
Yeah.
We're all here out of the aspects of privilege.
Have some patience and kindness with people, y'all.
Yeah, I know. I think, remember that we're all human and we all make mistakes and we are all knowledgeable on things, and that people's privilege might make them ignorant, but doesn't mean that they're discrediting or like...
Or trying to be hurtful.
Or, you know what I mean? Like I always say, this is the OML word on the street. Lots of love, guys.
Thanks
Share the
for having
love.
me. See you guys at the MCC. Come on out.
Actually, no. It should be the OML, sir.
Okay, I'm advertising my job now.
Okay, come see MCC and OML activities.
Yeah.
All right, love y'all. Share love.